On the 8th of October 1946, inside of Hamelin Prison, a brutal and horrific guard of the concentration camps was led towards a gallows by his executioner, Albert Pierpoint. The pair had met in the days before this moment, and Pierpoint had calculated the drop required through the execution structure to snap the neck of Anton Thumann, who was known as the Hangman of Majdanek. There were a number of concentration camp guards who at the end of the Second World War were sentenced to death for their actions inside some of the most terrifying places in the Third Reich. Anton Thumann was known for being an executioner, a torturer, and a sadistic beast who was more than happy to take the lives of prisoners, and he also set his huge German Shepherd dog onto the prisoners, encouraging this animal to maul them. He is remembered today alongside guards such as Irma Grazer, Johanna Bormann, and Josef Kramer, the Beast of Belsen, but Anton Thumann even rubbed shoulders with the Commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, and the Angel of Death, Josef Mengele. Welcome to The Untold Past. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Anton Thumann was born on the 31st of October 1912 inside of Bavaria, and he trained as a carpenter. He did experience a period of unemployment like so many people did in the 1920s and the 1930s, but at this time the Nazi Party was beginning to rise, and Hitler promised to restore German pride following the defeat of the First World War, and also fix many issues with the economy, and he wanted to get many people back into work. With this, Thumann joined the Nazi Party, and he was within the first 2 million members, and he then went further, answering Heinrich Himmler's call to arms as he joined the SS. Many men joined the paramilitary group as it gave them a new sense of identity, and they threw themselves into the Nazi political ideology, and at this time in the early 1930s it wasn't entirely clear that the SS would become one of the most feared and ruthless groups of the Second World War. From 1933, Thumann was sent to go and work inside of the concentration camp system, and he worked to begin with inside of the earliest concentration camp established following Hitler's rise to power, and that was Dachau. Dachau was the longest running camp established within the Third Reich, and to begin with it was intended to house Hitler's political opponents and those who were dissenting to his Nazi regime. As Hitler's stranglehold over the Nazis increased, many more people were sent to Dachau, which became known for its executions and torture, and over 41,000 people would die inside of the camp. Thumann became a block leader, and he was also serving inside of the Commandant's office at the camp, but he worked inside of many different sites. He was then sent to Gross Rosen in 1940, and was the protective custody camp leader there. He was involved in torture, execution, and in keeping the prisoners under lock and key. But then in February 1943, Thumann was moved to Majdanek concentration camp, and he served as a protective custody camp leader there. Majdanek's construction began in October 1941, and it was created near to Lublin, a city which was terrorised during the Second World War. Following the launching of Operation Barbarossa, the camp's size enlarged to a huge extent after the capture of many Soviet prisoners of war. Himmler would then order the destruction of Operation Reinhard, and this was the extermination of Poland's Jews. Majdanek became a place where large amounts of people were sent to as the slaughter continued, and it became a killing centre. Gassings were performed at the camp in plain view of other prisoners, and it was terrifying. Shootings took place with execution squads carrying this also out in full view. Those who were murdered at Majdanek to begin with were buried in mass graves, but they were later exhumed and burned by the Sonderkommando. The SS would later dispose of the remains by burning them on pyres or inside of the crematorium. As the years continued, the slaughter at Majdanek rolled on, and on one horrific day of killing, 18,500 people were murdered in just 24 hours at Majdanek. This was carried out by firing squads who performed the slaughter, and people were brought into the camp to execute. Anton Thumann inside of Majdanek was known for being a sadist, who also took part in the selections of prisoners to go to the gas chambers. When prisoners arrived at the camp, those who were considered not fit enough to work were sent straight to their deaths within the chambers, and Majdanek was seen as an extermination facility and camp. Thumann was seen driving prisoners into the gas chambers, and he also took part in the gassings. Anton Thumann was involved in executions, and he was part of firing squads, and also in giving the orders for other guards to shoot victims and prisoners. But he became known by the inmates as the Hangman, and he was known for being an executioner who personally secured the nooses around the necks of the inmates. He also owned a large German Shepherd dog, and he encouraged this to attack the prisoners, who he was overseeing, and this animal savaged a number of inmates, causing severe injuries and damage. But what is strange is that at some point Anton Thumann was photographed in April 1944 rubbing shoulders with some very high-ranking officials inside of Auschwitz. A meeting must have been held involving SS officers, and he was photographed with Richard Bayer, Josef Kramer, the Beast of Belsen, and former Commandant of Auschwitz II, Birkenau. Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, was also spotted in these images, the sadistic doctor who was known for human experimentation, as was Rudolf Höss, the former Commandant of Auschwitz, who built the deadliest camp from the ground up. In these images, Anton Thumann is spotted laughing and joking with men who, like him, were all mass murderers. But he then arrived at Neuengamme concentration camp and served here until the end of the war. Prisoners noted how he was often joined by his large dog and how he had a reputation for violence and abusing the prisoners. He was someone who was very feared. Thumann served here for roughly a year until April 1945, and during the evacuation process of the site, over 70 resistance fighters from other camps were sent to Neuengamme to be executed upon the orders of higher SS leaders. Anton Thumann took a leading role in these executions, and he hanged them between the dates of the 21st and the 23rd of April 1945 inside of a holding prison cell. A number of the men who resisted and put up a fight were also killed by Thumann, who locked them in a prison cell and then threw a hand grenade into this room through a window. Thumann then commanded prisoners to dispose of the dead bodies and to then try and raze Neuengamme to the ground to cover up the crimes of the site. As the war came to an end across Europe, Anton Thumann was seized by the British, and he was then brought to a military tribunal to stand charges linked to his actions at Neuengamme and the other concentration camps. Witnesses testified about the actions of the hangman, and the courtroom were disgusted at what they heard. Witnesses spoke about his attacking behaviour with his dog, and also about the executions he carried out with his bare hands, and also the torture he inflicted. For this he was condemned to death for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and was then sent to Hamelin Prison to await his date with the executioner. Inside Hamelin, which was under British occupation, the executioner Albert Pierpoint was based, and he executed hundreds of condemned Nazi war criminals. Pierpoint, days before Anton Thumann's execution, met with him to calculate his weight and height, and with this he then calculated the drop required through the gallows to snap Thumann's neck. On the 8th of October 1946, Anton Thumann was summoned from his prison cell on death row, and he was told he was to be executed imminently. Pierpoint and his assistant led Thumann towards the execution chamber, and in this were a number of gallows, which were used by the executioner to condemn people quicker. Thumann was led up the steps of one gallows, and Pierpoint made sure his arms and legs were secured, and he then placed him over the trapdoor. Pierpoint placed a white cap over the Hangman of Majdanek's head, and he then passed a noose over his neck and then tightened the rope. After all the checks were made, Albert Pierpoint pushed the lever, and Anton Thumann plunged through the trapdoor to his death, and his neck instantly snapped. Shortly after he was declared dead, he was placed inside of a coffin, ready to be buried in the prison yard. Anton Thumann was known for being a terrifying and barbaric guard of the concentration camps, who was responsible for horrifying slaughter, execution and torture. He was a man who during his employment in the camps was happy to execute and hang prisoners on the gallows, send inmates to their deaths inside the gas chambers, and drive them in quicker, and also blow up prisoners of war using grenades. He patrolled with his large dog, and this beast was encouraged to bite and attack inmates. He met his match inside of the courtroom, as witnesses told of the man he was truly like, and today images have been discovered showing him rubbing shoulders with the Beast of Belsen, the Angel of Death, and Commandant of Auschwitz Rudolf Höss. Whilst these men were laughing inside of Auschwitz, the gas chambers were constantly in operation, and the crematoria were burning the victims' remains. Anton Thumann is one of the worst beasts of the Second World War, and he was someone who had absolutely no remorse for his actions. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.